This is Joe Bolen, and this is the beginning of our video series on learning Microsoft's Visual Basic .NET environment. Today we're going to begin our first program, learn about the developmental environment that we'll be working in, and you will have the fun of seeing a program being created. For me, when I did my first program and had my first printout, it was quite an exciting experience. While it was quite simple that time, as well as this program will be quite simple, it gives you a sense that you have created something and you are in control of that creation process on that. So I'm going to be helping you through that process, and I hope you'll have the same kind of excitement that I've had learning how to program and being a programmer, later on an analyst, and finally taking care of other things and teaching. So let us get into learning about Visual Basic. And one of the first things that I'm going to take you to is I'm going to take you to my desktop. And I have on my desktop up the Explorer showing I'm on the U drive, although you could have the C drive for yourself. One of the things we're going to do is create a special folder for our projects. So I'm going to create on my U drive a new folder. So I click on the new folder button, and I'm going to call the folder for the projects that we're going to be creating through this series simply VB 2010, after the name of the book that we're using. So I've created an empty folder on my drive. Also, from the last video, Getting Started, I've downloaded from the Pearson site the examples on that, and we see our chapters that have been unarchived from the zip file that I downloaded from the book's website. So we have those two ready to go, and we're ready to start getting into our environment. Also, you hopefully at this point in time have installed your Visual Studio, and be it the Visual Studio Express 2010 that came with the book, or perhaps you have downloaded it from Microsoft's site or the DreamSpark site to have it. So you'll see that I have fired up the beginning of the integrated development environment for creating our programs. As you begin your first time launching your Visual Studio on that, you may be presented with a screen that I'm showing you now. This is the configuration request to set the default environment for programming. Now, Visual Studio allows you to have a number of different environments. Maybe you're doing projects in C# or doing web pages, dealing with the SQL database. We're going to be choosing the option to create an environment in the integrated development environment for doing Visual Basic programs. So if this menu pops up for you, choose the option to create a default Visual Basic environment. Once it fires up, you'll be greeted with the start page that you see on your screen. On this page are a number of features, plus the beginning aspect of our integrated development environment. Now, I'm using Professional 2012. You may be using an older version. There may be some variations and differences. Hopefully you'll be able to understand where you might need to make some changes to what you're seeing versus what you have on your system. And I will try to remember some of the older versions, but since I am at 2012, it's hard to remember all the older ones that preceded it. This is the welcome page, the start page, and you'll see this is the active tab up at the top. Also, I have to the far left a panel called the Solution Explorer, We'll talk more about the Solution Explorer as we get our first application up and running. But I'd like to bring your attention to this environment. We can always get back to this start page by coming up to our view on the menu, selecting the start page, and bring it back in case we would lose this. So therefore, it's fine for us to leave the option, and I pulled up an old project. I'm going to close out that old project, come back in and view the start menu again, the start page. And so we can bring that back anytime we want. Now, along the side, you'll see the option to start a brand new project, open an existing project on that. If you have the professional version, you'll have some other options available to you. Also, the recent projects that you might have been working on will appear. As you develop your projects, you'll see this list grow on that. I have the default selections that this page will close after I load a project, and this will show every time I start up. The options for a new project can also be attained by going up to the menu bar and clicking on File and going to New Project, as well as Open Project, one that's existing on that. So we have within our environment the ability to go to a number of different options on that. So let's begin to look at this environment. And first of all, we're going to go in and actually begin a new project. So I'm going to click on New Project. And it's going to ask me what type of project that I want to work on. I'm going to be working on a Windows form kind of project on that, but you'll see that there are other kinds of projects like doing web projects on that. So we're looking at highlighting templates, Visual Basic, Windows project, and you'll see that I have Windows form application slightly grayed. I'm going to click on it to emphasize that I'm choosing a Windows form project on that. And while your version that you are using of Visual Studio may be different than mine, you perhaps will see a different .NET framework that'll appear in your project settings. .NET Framework 4.5 is the top level available in 2012, but I could also back level it if I wanted to older editions on that. I will stay with the 4.5, but don't feel that you're missing anything at this point in time by using an older framework. That's fine for the kind of applications we'll be creating. The .NET framework is basically a library of different tools, components, objects that speed up our development time so that we can have a concentration on the code that we need to work on, and not so much creating a wheel for our car every time that we want to create a wheel. So we don't have to invent a wheel. We just choose a wheel out of the .NET framework and modify it for our use. So I have highlighted, in this case, the Windows Forms application. And you'll see that down below I have a name, and the default is a Windows application with a numeric number after it. This will become the name of our project that we're going to be creating. Now in this case, we're going to be creating a project, and I'm going to highlight over the Windows application 1 project and call the project a simple app on that. This needs to be one word with no embedded blank spaces in the name on that. It can contain upper and lower cases, as you see that I've chosen, and so my project is going to be called a simple app. So after you have done that, we'll click the OK button, and we will see the system loading up and changing our environment. First of all, because I chose a Windows application form environment, I have a default Form 1 that's been presented on the screen. And now I'd like to bring your attention over to the Solution Explorer itself on the right side. If you do not see this Solution Explorer, you can come up to the View option and choose to click on the Solutions Explorer from the View option to bring it back. So I have the Solutions Explorer showing, and we see here that the name of my project is a simple app on that, and we see some other objects below it. And then below that simple app is also a properties window, and if you do not see that, once again you can bring that up by clicking on View as well and bringing up the properties window. Right now we have the Form 1 showing up, and this is in the active window, and then we see a little tab showing that we're in the designer window GUI interface for this form. This form actually has been inherited from a .NET framework class of Windows Forms. And so this is the default form, which we will choose to modify as we go through the creation of our particular project. Now, before I go any further, let's take a look at what our project's going to look like. So I'm going to bring up our project that we've been working on, and I'm going to fire up and get into our project area. And I'm going to go to the examples folder to chapter 2 of the example folders. And we're going to be creating this simple app executable program during the process of our coding. So let's see what our end product will look like. I'm double clicking on the end product of the simple app, and here we see our basic form. The form has a title in it called a simple app. It also has a label in it and a picture box with an image in the picture box, and it has the background color of the form changed to light blue. So what we'll learn during this process is how we begin creating that project, modifying the properties of this form to have a label, a picture box with an image in it, and changing some of the properties of the different controls as well as the form. And I close out this application by hitting the close button. So if you want to check out what your end product might look like with the examples folder, chapter 2, drill into chapter 2 and double click on a simple app on that to see what your project will look like. Okay, we've got our form up and ready to go. We are now ready to begin the process, and let's take a look at what we have. We have Form 1 available to us, and over to our right side is what's called the component box area. It's a drop-down box. We'll see this more active with options as I proceed through the lesson, but right now Form 1 is selected. It has focus in the environment, and we see a number of properties available to us on the side here. One of the things we want to do is look at those properties, and what I want to do is change, first of all, the title that appears in the title box of our form by double clicking on the text property. I've scrolled down to the text property, And I want to change the name so that my title bar will have a name other than Form 1. So I'm going to call this A Simple App. And here it's appropriate to have spaces. Normally for the title of a form, we use it like a title of a book, where we use uppercase characters to begin each major word of the title. While I'm here, though, let's take a look at what is the text property. Well, we know it's going to change our title, and if I tab out of this particular property in the properties area, you'll see my form changing names on that. So now my form's title is a simple app. So we see a number of properties that are part of the text box. We'll look at those a little bit more as we progress through the exercise. So I have changed the title, and what I would like you to do is, as you program, begin to learn the properties of different controls and of the forms that you'll be using. For example, here I'm at the text property of the form, and maybe I'd like to know a little bit more about that, or I have a question: what really is this? Well, F1 gives us a quick way to go to help to find out information about that. And since my cursor is located in this particular property and I hit the F1 key, I'm going to go out to the internet, and you will see that I'll bring up the information about a form's text property. And so I can read about it and find out that I can set that text property on this control with whatever title I need to have happen. And we can see other parts of the form class over here to the side as well, and we can understand what properties are part of the form class. Those will be seen as we look at the properties box. We can go directly out there by hitting F1, or in this case I'm already looking at one property on this. In this case the text control part of the form, but we can see that there are other properties out there. This helps us learn about those properties, and you'll notice that we have C#, C++, and F# as other languages that have the same property as our Visual Basic. The syntax will look a little bit different perhaps, but basically we can set those in our code to create a title for our form. Okay, so remember that we can use the F1 key to find out information about properties as well as parts of our developmental environment. So I've set the property at this point for our form, but I'd like to change the background color to this form to make it a little bit more exciting in this particular case. And so I'm going to scroll on the properties area of the Form 1. I have Form 1 selected. I'm going to scroll till I see the background color right here. And right now we see it as a light gray. I'm going to double click on the back color property, and you'll see a drop down box. I'm going to hit the drop down box, and you'll see right now I have the default is the control color. What I'd like you to do is to look at the custom tab. So click on the custom tab, and you'll see there are a number of colors I can choose from, and I'm going to choose the light blue color where my mouse is at right now, and we'll change the background color of our form to light blue. And as you see, the value for light blue, this is the red, green, and blue components of the color that we picked, and our form has now the background of light blue. So we've changed the properties of our default form to have a background color of light blue and to have a title property, text property of a simple app. Now we'd like to introduce our first controls. Now, one of the things I want to do before I go any further is you'll notice that I have an asterisk up at the top on my tab, and I want to save this. This indicates that it hasn't been saved. And so I'm going to hit the Save All. I could go to File and hit Save All on that. That's one option to go. Or I can go to the icon, and you'll see as I hold my mouse on the icon that the screen tips start to show up to help me know what the icons mean. In this case, I want to hit the Save All for the first time so we can save this app. Right now it's only in memory, and I'm going to click that, and we see the name of our solution and the name of our particular project on that that we're getting ready to save. And I'm going to tell it that I want to save in a special spot. So I'm going to hit Browse, and I'm going to navigate to the right spot to save things. So I'm going to go to the, in this case, I'm going to actually drill down through my system to the U drive. I'm going to click on a Simply VB 2010 folder that I created at the beginning of the video and select folder. At this point I've got this set. Now I could put that in there directly, but since this particular exercise relates to the textbooks that I'm using, I'm going to modify this and say Chapter 3. So I'm going to say CH03 to save this project. And it will create a directory for our solution and create the information for our project at this point. So I hit Save. Okay, so I've saved the project. You notice the little star has gone away, the asterisk has gone away from our active tab. And right now I'm in what's called the Designer window on this. This is where I design the form for our project. Now, the project we want to have looks good at this point in time, but I'd like to add a label, and I'd like to also add a picture box. So let's begin the process of adding those components from our library of tools on that. And you'll see over at the side I have a toolbox on that, and I can click on Toolbox and bring that to the active pane. I'm going to also select to turn off auto hide and pin it so I can reference this toolbox easier during this particular process of designing the form. So I'm going to hit the little pin to lock it in place. Now I can see my form as well as the different components. So I'm going to collapse down all the components at this moment. I'm going to expand the All Windows Forms group at this time, and you'll see that I have a number of components that I can put into my form. Well, we have two choices of how to put in a label. Now, a label is a descriptive text that we want on our form, so it's an output only kind of component. And so I come down to the label component here, which is label. I have two choices. I can double click on this, or I can drag and drop it onto my form. Let me first do a double click on the label, and you'll see my label has been brought over here on that, and I can move it around. I'm going to delete the label and drag and drop it now. So I'm going to take it and drag it onto my form. You'll see it come over, and I'll release the mouse, and I also have the label. Now I want to bring your attention, since the label is highlighted right now and active, my component box in the properties area now shows label 1. While I'm here, I'll hit the drop down. We could jump back to form 1 on that, in which I'm looking at the whole form, and you will see sizing handles on the form. If I wanted to change the size of the form, I could drag those sizing handles. But let's bring back to focus the label itself. So I'm going to go to the component drop-down box, click on label 1, and you'll see that a label has a number of properties as well. Now for this particular label, I want to turn off what's called auto size. Auto size allows the label to grow as I add information to the label. In this case, I don't want it to grow, so I'm going to double click on auto size and make it false on that. And notice that my label has now a box with sizing handles to it. It has a default name of label in it. And let's take a look at that label property. So I've got auto size is false at this point in time. Let's come down now and look at the text property of our label. And our text property defaulted to label 1. Well, in this particular example, I'm going to highlight label 1 and change that to a new text. I'm going to say, for this particular one, to make it like our program, we're going to create in our label, welcome to Visual Basic. Put an exclamation point on the end, and then tab out of it. Now we can see that it didn't quite fit the form, and it's also pretty small. I'm going to hit the sizing handle a little bit so you can see me change the size, and now I can get it to size a little bit. Once again, it's a very small font, so I want to change the font size of this label, and it has a font property. So I'm going to scroll to the font property, and right now you'll see the default has been Microsoft Sans Serif 8.25 point font size. I'm going to click on this, and we're going to change it to Microsoft's recommended graphic user interface standards. So I'm going to click on the little box with 3 little periods on it, and it'll bring up a dialog box for me to view. At this point, I'm going to change the font to Seago UI. And you'll see as I start to type, Seago UI is the default font that Microsoft recommends for its Windows forms. Also, for this particular project, I'm going to change the font size to a larger size on that. But before I do, let's take a look at the default we would normally have is a 9-point font if we were going to design more components to our form. So Seago UI, regular font style, 9-point is the default that we usually use for our graphical user interface default font sizes. Now in this particular one, the form I'm making, I'm going to change the font size clear up to 24 points. So I'm going to scroll down and select 24 points. We get an example of what it would look like, and I'm going to say OK. And notice now our box has changed a little bit, and we're going to make our box even wider at this point. So I'm going to drag the sizing handles. I'm going to move it more to the center. And let's move the sizing handle some more. I'm getting it just about right. Now, one of the things I can do is align this label within the box itself. And so I want to deal with the text alignment. So I'm going to go to the text alignment property. Right now the text alignment property that I have highlighted is top left. I'm going to hit the drop down box and you'll see that top left is highlighted. Well, we want to have, in this case, our text centered in our box. So I'm going to hit the centered section here so it's centered. Now it's centered in our box on that, and you saw it change a little bit. If I had hit something else, let's say I had gone to the far right, it would have gone over to the right side, but I want it centered. The other thing I would want to do is maybe center this whole label in reference to the form on that. So I can do that as well. I'm going to click on this. I have the label in my properties. I'm going to come up to the format option on my menu bar, and I'm going to come down to where it says center in form. I'm going to choose to center this horizontally so it has equal left and right margins in my form. Now I've got this centered, and so I've got my label pretty well set where I want it. And I'm going to click on just the form itself at this point. So I've got my label in place on that. I'm highlighting it again, showing it to you in the properties box. And let's review what we have changed at this point. We've changed our font to the Microsoft default recommended font of Seago UI. However, I've gone to a much larger font size of 24 points on this for the property of that particular label. Also, I've changed the for the label. It has, you notice, it is inherited from the form, the back color. So it has actually inherited some of the characteristics of the form with its back color. And I've changed the text to welcome to Visual Basic ! And I've done the text align to middle center. So we've learned a number of properties already related to the label component. Now let's add a picture box. So I'm going to click back onto the form, and I'm going to go to my toolbox, and once again take a look at all the different components in the toolbox. We'll learn about a number of them during this video series. Right now we're going to be looking at PictureBox, so I'm going to scroll to the PictureBox, and I'm going to drag the PictureBox down to my form, and then I'm going to release it. Now the PictureBox is basically a container to hold an image, and so I want to size this image area a little bit, so I'm going to grab the sizing handles and bring it out a little bit, and you'll notice I'll start to get little aids along the side so that I get it stretched to the right location, and I'll bring it down here and release it. So I've got my picture box where I want to have it, but now I'd like to set the properties of that picture box. We've already set the size. Once again, it's inherited right now the background color from the form, but I want to put an image in that box. So I'm going to scroll to the area where it says image. Right now you'll see image is none. So I want to bring in an image. I'm going to click on the little box to the right of that property for image and get a dialog box. And we have here to select a resource. Right now I have no resource, so I need to import that resource. I'm going to hit import. For this particular one, we're going to go back to our examples folder to get the resource. So I want to scroll to the examples folder. I'm going to go to chapter 2 of the examples folder, and you'll see that the bug PNG is one of the options that I can select to bring in. So I'm going to highlight that, and at this point I'm going to select on that and say open. And we can bring in a number of different image types. We can bring in, as we have here, the PNG program, the portable network graphic. We can bring in the GIF, which is the graphic interchange format, the JPEG, which is the joint photographic expert group format, or we could bring in the Windows bitmap, which is the BMP extension. So there are 4 basic extension types that we can bring in: PNG, GIF, bitmap, and JPEG into our project. I've now got it selected, and I'll say OK to my dialog box, and my graphic comes in, but notice my graphic doesn't quite look right. What I need to do is tell that graphic how I want it to appear in my text box, or in my picture box. So at this point I'm going to choose the size mode as one of its properties of the picture box. So let me scroll down to size mode, and right now you'll see size mode over here, and its default is normal. But I'm going to change this so that that picture that we're importing, that's now in our resource file, is such that it will stretch and fit in. So I'm going to take stretch image. Notice there's some other options. I'll let you research that, but right for this project we'll take the stretch image option, and our picture will size itself and fit now into the picture box that we have available. Also, as you look at the project area, you will see that we have a resource folder that has pulled in our picture when we imported it into our project on it. So now I have the picture in. I've set the size mode to stretch image. I have brought in that image into it, and we're ready to click the outside of the form. Now I've got the form selected, and it looks very nice. At this point, one of the things that is a good idea to do is we have basically, at this point in time, positioned everything where we want to have it, and we would like to lock the controls so we don't accidentally change things. So I'm going to go up to the format option, and you'll see lock controls. That'll keep me from accidentally nudging a control that I put on my form in a different spot. You'll see a little lock occur, and now while I can modify some of the properties, the positions basically have been locked in place. Also, I've changed the form somewhat. We've added the label and the graphics. So I want to make certain I do a save again, and we'll do a save all. Now, why am I choosing the save all? Well, there actually is a lot of code going on behind this form. And what I'm going to do is come over to the Solution Explorer and click on the Show All Files icon in the Solution Explorer. And you'll notice that there are a number of folders and different things appearing. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to expand Form 1. And you'll notice that Form 1, as I scroll down, has a number of components in it. The form that we're used to seeing is just this part, but actually the designer has been developing for us in the background a lot of code to create our form. Let me click on this particular one. Now, this is normally not something we would edit, but I want you to see that we have, in fact, have a lot of code that has been generated as we have changed the properties to our form, and that ultimately we have inherited the system.windows.form class into our Form 1 class. So this has inherited that information from the framework that we're working with. I'm going to close that without doing any change on it. At this point, we've got our system design, and one of the things I'd like to bring to your attention is right now I am in the designer, Windows Designer part of the application. On by noticing, you see the word design at the top. Now if I were to go to some other aspect, and we'll see it later on in other projects, the toolbox, even if it is pinned to this location, may not show the components available for us if we're not in designer mode. This is only available while we're in designer mode. So at this point I'm going to go back to auto hide because I don't need the toolbox anymore. And I'm ready to check to see if my code works. And what we do is we come up to the Start option, and we can hit the drop down if you like, and you'll see the Start button. This begins the process of taking the information that we've created, the properties we have set, and it will change that English language of Visual Basic into computer language and run our program for us in debug mode. So I'm going to hit the Start button. You could also hit the F5 key to do the same thing. I hit Start, our program's compiling, and now we've got our program running on it. So there is our first program up and running on that. And so we've got our label, our picture box with our image in it. We've modified our form with a background color of light blue, and we've also modified the text property of our form, creating a simple label app as the title that'll appear on our title bar, and our project is complete. We can end the projects running by hitting the close button on that, or alternate F4, Alt F4 to close that. But we'll hit the close button, and now we're back into our regular design mode instead of run mode. So let's do this again. We have our form set. We're going to hit the Start button or F5 key, and our program runs, and we've got it ready to go. Now, here's something you could do to modify this program and make it your own. Create this with maybe changing the label and saying I caught a fish this big on that. Or we could maybe make a little something special, maybe put your girlfriend or your mother or boyfriend in the picture area on that, and something romantic or nice to say in the label area, and make something special for them. So you could use this as a model to begin the concept of modifying it for yourself. Right now we've introduced you to the Windows form. We've gone into the actual process of creating our first form. We've left a lot of things at its default. We'll learn more about that. But you'll see that I do have my project over here. I'm going to deselect Show All Files. So we're back to the basic parts of our form. Also notice I can resize the Solution Explorer so I can see a little bit more if I need to. I can also size left and right my panel if I need to read more to the side on that. And right now we have selected the form itself, and you'll see its properties. Remember, this is the component properties area where we select different components of our form, and we can then select that and modify the properties related to that particular component that we're using. And the F5 key or debug start, or just hitting the start button on our form will also run debug. We'll learn more about the process of taking our code and compiling it in debug mode, and then later on we'll look at actually creating the code for a final release for production. We'll see about those different aspects. Our project, while it is very simple, has created a number of different objects behind it for us automatically. We only have to focus in on the things that we need to modify for our particular task or purpose. One important thing to do after you're done is to hit the Save All button. If you're going to start a new project, you can go up and choose File, Close Project, and close the project out and start a new project, or you can exit as well out of the program. I'm going to do a closed project so you can see what that's like. I can also come back and see that start page again by coming up to View Start Page. So we can see this area again, just like we had when we began our video. And I'm going to go up and hit File, Close, Exit to end Visual Studio. So we've gone through our first program. Obviously, it's a simple program. We need to get our legs first before we can really run. And so we're just now beginning to learn some of the different parts of a Windows form program. We have the form itself, and we can have multiple forms in our program. We can modify the properties of that form, and you saw that there are many properties to the form itself that we can change. We can also then add components from our toolbox onto the form so that we can have buttons and list boxes and drop down boxes, and in this case it was a picture box and a label that we added, and we want to then modify those as well. And I want to have you remember that component drop down area of the properties, that we can select one of those components, then modify the properties of that control that we're using. And then we go to the F5 key or the start debug area to actually take that code that we've modified, goes through what's called a process of compiling, changing human readable code into machine readable code that the computer then runs and executes. Right now we're doing it only in what's called a debug mode when we run it. We'll be able to see later on how we can step through each line of our code to see what's going on, to examine different variables we might be working with in the process. And then later on we'll actually go to the process where we're not doing just the debug mode, but we're also running it in a fully released production mode. So at this point in time, study the textbook that I have recommended for you. Learn about the integrated development environment. Look at the different icons available to you. Maybe create your own form, add your own picture box and image that you might like to add to it, add a label or two, modify the label and some of its properties, maybe its font size, maybe its text alignment, and create your own little project and get a feeling for what it's like to create something on that, and the satisfaction that you are inventing and creating something that's just your own. We'll be, of course, doing things according to the specifications that are given to us as programmers in a business environment. You're given a project and you have to do what the customer wants. But in our environment, as a hobbyist, perhaps you can make anything you want. I'm going to try to teach you and take you through the process of learning about the different components so that you can start to make your own programs and be creative and have fun programming with VisualBasic.net. And hopefully this will launch you on a fun path of programming and enjoyment of creating. So until next time,